So it's been a few months since I made a video, and that's for a lot of reasons. Mostly it gets pretty crazy for me around the holidays. I tend to finish a book every year, which I did again this year. So it's been a minute, and I had some shop-related projects and things like that to get into as well. So here in the new year, we're going to dive into a new project on the ongoing project, which is going to ultimately be an engine swap for the 65 Cadillac behind me here. So a few months ago, I made the choice to do a compression check on the 429 engine that's in my 65. And I discovered that one of the cylinders was pretty low for compression. And I went ahead and further checked what was wrong and determined that when I pressurized that particular cylinder, I was getting leaked down through the exhaust. So what that means is a problem with the exhaust valve. So I went from there to go ahead and pull the head off of that side of the engine to see what was going on, and discovered a burned exhaust valve and some other internal engine problems. Now, it took me a minute to try to figure out what I was going to do about this particular issue. One of the options would be to have the heads rebuilt and go ahead and put those on the engine and try to go that route. But I discovered some other issues with the engine, some pitting in the cylinders, which means it would be a whole engine rebuild. Now, if you've watched some of my other videos, you've probably seen the videos I made a few years ago on the Eldorado. And I found a 550 cubic inch big block that I was gonna put in the Eldorado. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put that 550 cubic inch Cadillac big block in my 65 instead. So first, let's go ahead and take a peek at what's wrong with the existing 429. And then we'll talk about how I'm gonna go ahead and swap in this monster 550 cubic inch engine. So here's the two heads off of the 429 Cadillac engine. And as you can see, the offending valve is this one right here. And what's happened to this valve is it's burned. And you can see where it's got discoloration on the edge of the valve there. So along this edge of the valve and the seat, it's no longer sealing, which is allowing my compression to escape through the exhaust. You can also see from looking at these heads that there's quite a bit of buildup, carbon buildup on all the cylinders. And the reason for that is we've got oil leaking past the valve guides. And to me, what probably happened here is the engine rebuilder, when they did rebuild this engine, didn't do a very good job of rebuilding it. They essentially cut corners and didn't replace the valve guides when they should have. And the end result of not replacing the valve guides was the valve guides were too loose, which ultimately led to oil leaking past the valve guides, even though the seals were newer. And that, over time, caused the exhaust valve to burn and created a lot of deposits and buildup on the valves and in the heads. Now, these heads could be repaired by having them machined, rebuilt, new guides installed, probably new valves, and certainly new seals. But by the time I spend all the money and time on that, the Cadillac big block motor I already have is starting to look pretty good. Now, as we come over to the vehicle here, I will show you the problem I discovered with the engine. So it's a little bit difficult to see, but right in here, there's pitting on the cylinder wall. And there's a little bit of pitting in the cylinder as well. Now that comes from the engine sitting for most likely a long time, and water being introduced into those cylinders and then causing rust, which eventually causes pitting. And then when you start to run the engine again, which I did, it creates a lack of sealing of the compression rings on the piston. So yeah, I could put a new set of heads on this engine, but at this point there's not really a whole lot of reason to do so,
because the lower end here would also need to be rebuilt. And the cost of doing so would be basically just out of my budget right now. So instead of doing that, we're going to come over here and we're going to go for this instead. The 550 cubic inch Cadillac big block that I was going to put into the Eldorado is now going to go ahead and find its way into my 65. And this is actually going to be a pretty reasonable swap. They do make an adapter that goes between this engine and the Chevy transmission bell housing I currently have. They also make a flywheel that bolts directly to the Cadillac 500 motors and a pilot bushing that goes directly into the crank. Now, this oil pan will have to come off because that is going to be an oil pan that will only fit the Eldorado. And I will be going back to this style pan here, which is a rear-wheel drive front or mid-sup pan. And in theory, because in 1968, the Cadillac introduced the 472, which is the same externally as the 500, the engine mounts for 1968 Cadillac should mount my 550 cubic inch motor directly into this chassis, because the chassis for the Cadillac was the same from 1965 through 1970. So hopefully here, if all goes well, factory style 68 engine mounts will allow me to use a relatively inexpensive transmission to engine adapter to put this 550 cubic inch engine directly into my 65. So let's go ahead and dive into some time lapses as I continue to disassemble and remove the old engine from the 65 Hearse. All right, so as you can see, I've made a lot of progress. And as you also may have noticed, this is not the big block engine I'm going to be putting in the 65. So I have a lot of old Cadillac parts around, including this bare 500 Cadillac big block. And what I chose to do here is go ahead and install this empty block so that I can fabricate everything and make sure everything fits and not have to put the nice fresh motor at risk to do so. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things I put together here. So first off, I went ahead and I modified an inexpensive set of headers to fit inside the engine compartment here. The driver's side header didn't require a whole lot of modification. This passenger side header had to be completely redesigned to clear everything. And then once I got those done, I went ahead and found myself a aluminum intake manifold, which will help with performance of the new big block engine. And I utilized that to mock up with my carburetor and my spacer and an air cleaner that allows me to set absolutely everything up and check the hood closed. Because I don't have the radiator in place, I'm able to look in through the grill and ensure that I have plenty of clearance on my air cleaner. Another decision I made in this last couple of weeks here as I've been putting this together is that this new engine that I'm going to be using, I want to go ahead and put roller rockers in it because it doesn't currently have roller rockers, it has stock rockers. And I want to ensure that my horsepower and performance is reliable and the lifespan of the new engine is long. So I'm going to go ahead and put roller rockers in it. Now, to be able to do that, I required a tall valve cover. Now, tall valve covers for a 500 Cadillac can be incredibly expensive. So rather than buying a set, I chose to utilize some old 429 valve covers in combination with some other Cadillac 500 valve covers and chop them up and make myself a new set. So this new set is extra tall. This passenger side cover has a fill tube that I put together that allows me to have a breather type fill cap. And then as you can see on this other side, on this valve cover, there's a port for a 90-degree PCV valve grommet, which will allow me to run the PCV valve to the front of the new carburetor. So that pretty much does everything under the hood. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of room all around, and the fitment is really quite nice. And those stock 68 Cadillac engine mounts fit with the engine into the factory frame holes, which is another really handy deal. So the other thing I will show you is the exhaust system I went ahead and created for it. So it's a little hard to see, but the time lapse showcased me putting together this system. And this system is full 2.5 mandrel bent tube, dozens of pieces assembled to make it happen. Probably about 25 pieces or something like that. And this also puts an X pipe right there in the middle in the spot where there's plenty of clearance on the oil pan. Now, I'm thinking the X pipe is going to make for a really nice, even exhaust note, even though I do have the side pipes. So another spot we'll check out here is in the wheel well, where you can see I added a hanger that mounts and welds into the exhaust. And the suspension is drooped right now because I have the car in jack stands. But this whole thing is designed so there'll be tons of clearance for turning. And as you can see, that X pipe has clearance on all the parts, and we got about 3/8 to 1/2 inch of clearance on the oil pan. And it also clears all the steering.
This was a really difficult exhaust system to build. I kind of had hoped to take some footage of me assembling it, but there really wasn't a way to get the camera underneath the car and also be able to get in there and weld and do all the work on it. So I just showcased welding the system together.
The next remaining component that needs to be addressed, as you can see right in here, there's a big hole I had put in the inner fender, and there's one on the other side as well, and that's where the old exhaust had dumped down in. Now, since I'm converting, or since I did convert the front to air ride suspension, and I'm going to be converting the rear to air ride, I no longer need this system, and I was having clearance issues with the tires during turning. So I'm going to have to make a patch panel for this side as well as for the other side. But other than those two patch panels, we have ourselves a mostly complete assembly. There's definitely some more details that need to be addressed. I have to redesign the throttle pedal. It runs into the back of the engine block in the intake manifold, so that's going to have to be reshaped. And there's a bracket for the clutch slave cylinder underneath that's going to have to be redesigned. And a few other things here and there. But so far, things are shaping up really well to get this big block motor truly installed. And the next big thing is going to be to go ahead and paint the new motor and get everything all dialed in, put the roller rockers in it, finish valve covers, all that kind of stuff. But it is coming together very nicely, and I'm super excited about this engine swap.
So that's going to do it for this particular week's video. Now that I've wrapped up all my time lapses and we've talked about all the parts that I've worked on so far on this particular engine swap. And there's a few more things I'd like to cover before we close for the week. So earlier in the video at the beginning, I introduced the new engine that I'm putting in this vehicle as a 550 cubic inch engine. And I had made some preliminary measurements, some kind of crude measurements several months ago that brought me to that 550 cubic inch number. So I had the ability recently to borrow a bore scope and a few other important and very fine tools, and utilizing several different types of online calculators, a bunch of math, a bunch of records, and a lot of research, I got some more realistic information as to what this new engine is. So it looks to be a 500 Cadillac big block engine that has been bored 30 thousandths over with a normal type aftermarket piston with a 9.5 cc circular dish, which is similar to a 74 through 76 aftermarket piston. And then the stroke appears to be a 4.5 inch total stroke, which is about, let's see, 0.2 bigger than the factory stroke. And between the stroke and the bore, it turns out that this engine is actually a 530 cubic inch engine. Now, with the heads that I have, it appears that it's also going to be about 9:1 compression. And I did some measuring of the cam, and I believe that it's a 450 lift type cam, which is a mild to moderate RV style cam. With all these numbers being very close to reality without being able to tear the engine completely apart, it's safe to assume that this is, in fact, a 530 cubic inch stroked big block. Now, in addition to that, and all of those numbers, I can guess that it's probably going to be around 500 horsepower and probably between 600 and 650 foot-pounds of torque, which is going to be a wonderful engine combo for this particular vehicle. And the 9:1 compression will be very amiable for utilizing common fuels and premium fuels. So, all of that being said, The next big thing is going to be finishing up the last little touch-up stuff to ensure that everything fits before I try to put the new engine in. And then I have to go ahead and do cleanup, painting, gaskets, and roller rockers and a bunch of stuff on the engine. So the next time we make a video, it'll probably be more engine related than this particular time. And until then, I had a lot of fun. Hope you guys did too. And we'll see you next time.